I understand their worry and their frustration. We've seen triple-digit swings in the stock market. Major financial institutions have teetered on the edge of collapse, and some have failed. As uncertainty has grown, many banks have restricted lending.
Completely wiped out.
Credit
the NASDAQ,
markets have
everything
frozen.
and more has been completely
And families
wiped out.
and businesses
The Dow
have found it
traders are
harder to
standing
borrow
there
money.
watching in amazement, and I don't blame them.
We're in the midst of a serious financial crisis. And financial assets related to home mortgages have lost value during the housing decline. And the banks holding these assets have restricted credit. As a result, our entire economy is in danger.
The aftermath of the 2008 U.S. financial crisis caused an unprecedented dismantling of our communities. From rural America to the suburbs to urban neighborhood, houses were foreclosed, auctioned off, and families evicted, leaving millions of buildings and homes abandoned, neglected, and often in the hands of banks and investors who had little or no regard for the communities that they affected. Homeowners who did experience foreclosure still suffered the loss of their home equity as neighboring foreclosures plunged property prices to record low values, turning people's home assets into toxic, underwater real estate debt. The hardest hit communities were working-class neighborhoods, many consisting predominantly of Black and Hispanic homeowners and renters. These communities fought an uphill battle to join the ranks of the middle class, only to become again dilapidated neighborhoods entrenched in rising poverty.
Well, Dorchester is kind of the epicenter of foreclosure crisis in Boston. You know, there's maybe as many as half of all the foreclosure deeds in Boston are filed in Dorchester. I think at one point a single-family house in Dorchester was probably going for $350,000 to $400,000, like in 2005 and 6, at the height of the real estate bubble. And now those same properties are worth probably less than $200,000, half that mortgage value or less. And that is the crisis in a nutshell right there.
Recent reports claim that the U.S. real estate market is starting to improve and that foreclosures are in the decline. These reported improvements have not happened in many of the lower income and working class neighborhoods. Some of the slowdown in foreclosures in these neighborhoods are not due to an economic recovery, but instead a direct result of growing grassroots organizations that help homeowners and renters organize and fight bank foreclosures and eviction policies. Distressed homeowners and renters have taken their fight to the street and the courthouses across this nation. Many of the foreclosed homes are rental properties which also displace tenants who have faithfully paid their rent every month. One such resident fighting back to stay in her home is Yolanda Nova. Yolanda has been a tenant for almost 6 years in a two-family home located in Boston. She takes care of her elderly father and 8-year-old granddaughter, as well as owning and managing for 5 years a daycare center which is located on the first floor unit of her home. Yolanda's daycare center is situated in the once troubled area of Four Corners section of a Dorchester neighborhood, an area that years ago was riddled with crime and poverty. During the housing boom, new homes were developed and responsible citizens like Yolanda moved in. Her daycare center provides affordable, quality childcare for working-class families in her neighborhood. Her business, as well as other small businesses in the area, provide both a needed service and an anchor for a fragile neighborhood in need of stability. Yolanda's housing troubles began when her landlord was foreclosed on in February of 2012. When the landlord was foreclosed on, Fannie Mae took receivership of the property and tried to evict her, even though she had always paid her rent and still wanted to continue paying her rent, and despite Massachusetts laws protecting rental tenants in foreclosed properties. Fannie Mae started pursuing legal eviction actions against her. If they would win, Yolanda would lose her home and her daycare business, her sole source of income for her family.
I like to work daycare because since my adolescence, I was always interested in children. I like children very much, and now that I have experience, every day I get even a little bit more into it because I like to be helpful to the children. I like to teach them to communicate with other children, teach them how to eat by themselves, and how to get along. I like to serve the community and help parents with their children as much as possible.
When Yolanda was asked about how she knew her home was up for auction, she said she realized that they were auctioning the house the same day that they came over on February 23rd. She opened her front door to greet one of her daycare parents when she saw a number of vehicles and people in front of her home. Yolanda said,
I didn't know what was going on, so I later stood at the door looking out. A gentleman came up to me and asked me whether I knew why they were there and who they were. I told him I didn't know. They told me they were auctioning off the house, that the owner had lost it, and that the bank had taken it. Well, it was a big surprise for me since I didn't know what was going on. They later handed me some papers for me to place on the door. They asked me a number of questions. Who lived with me? How old were the people? And how long had we been living at the property?
Yolanda said that prior to that day, she had never been notified by Fannie Mae of the foreclosure. Next, Yolanda contacted Fannie Mae and tried to negotiate a way to stay in her home. She continues,
I asked them if they could rent the apartment to me since I already had been living there for 5 years. I was set up with my programs, and I had a number of parents for whom it was helpful that I stay here because they live close by. But Fannie Mae said no. They could not negotiate with me because I had a daycare, and what they wanted for me to do was just to move out.
Yolanda had no idea that this would be the beginning of a long legal battle with Fannie Mae. For the next 12 months, Yolanda would go every month to court to fight Fannie Mae against her eviction. When they refused to rent to Yolanda, she then offered to purchase the property, and again Fannie Mae said no to her. They told her that it was against their policies to sell to tenants of foreclosed properties, and that they did not want to finance a property with a daycare. They would rather have the property be vacant and then auction it off to a private investor. Yolanda did not give up. She joined a Boston housing activist group which provided her with free legal assistance and political resources to protest Fannie Mae's policies.
My name is Dave Grossman. I'm a clinical professor at Harvard Law School and the director of the Harvard Legal Aid Bureau. I've worked together with City Life for many years now in sort of a joint legal and organizing effort to try to deal with housing problems in Boston neighborhoods. A big piece of what we're doing is trying to deal with the effects of the foreclosure crisis on low-income neighborhoods in Boston.
My name is Chris Larson. I'm a junior at Tufts University. I've been an intern at the Harvard Legal Aid Bureau for a little over a year now. What they were seeing over and over again was a massive amount of tenants and former owners coming to Boston Housing Court being evicted by the banks that took possession of the property. And these tenants and former owners had no idea what their legal rights were. They had no idea how to assert their rights, and basically the bank was forcing them out for nothing. The canvassing aspect really is where the legal process begins. When we go door to door to these former owners and tenants alike and let them know what their legal rights are. Once we get them to City Life, we can advise them with our legal attorneys, legal services attorneys that are at the meetings every Tuesday night, and keep on top of them, keep on top of their case as it progresses.
Tenants who are living in foreclosed properties, I would say, are completely blameless. There's no good argument that they've done anything wrong. They just happen to be renting in the wrong place at the wrong time from an owner who got foreclosed.
And the banks were evicting them in what was called a no-fault eviction. So the banks would even admit the fact that, hey, look, this foreclosure is by no fault of your own. You paid your rent on time to the landlord, and it's the landlord's fault that he didn't pay, didn't use your rent to pay the mortgage, etc.
We getting sold out. Some living underwater in their own house. They hear the word for
child care for many of our families. All she wants to do is to acquire this home, which she has lived in for a while.
Here today, not only for Yolanda and her family, but really because what's happening to her is happening to so many people in this country, and it just shouldn't be happening. It's not normal to tell somebody who's doing the right thing, who's willing to pay, who's willing to invest in their community. It's not normal to tell them, get out and leave.
This is where her roots are. This is where she serves the community through her daycare. So she just ended by saying, I'm not leaving.
When Yolanda was asked what she hoped the outcome of her case would be, she responded,
I wish that a resolution came about already, and that it is a good resolution because, in reality, I'm coming up on a year with this headache, and the stress that I have is affecting my health a lot. What I would like is for them to at least agree to negotiate with me, whether they rent to me or whether they sell the house to me. I just want them to accept a proposal that would allow me to stay here with my daycare.
When asked what she would do if she lost the case, she said,
Well, if I lose and I had to leave here, it is something so difficult that I would rather not even think about it. I don't even want to think about it.
Was Yolanda's case unique, or did all banks treat people like this? Was this a standard protocol for lending institutions not to rent or sell homes to daycare owners, or was this just Fannie Mae's policy not to work with people like Yolanda? Another daycare owner who also experienced a foreclosure in her home and daycare center, but with a different bank, was also interviewed.
My name is Pamela Nichols, and I live in the Hyde Park, Massachusetts area. I've owned my home for 19 years with my daughter. She's now 18 years old. I managed my home daycare for the past 23 years, which I operate in my home, and I'm very passionate about having my home with my home daycare in it. Yes, I did try to get a loan modification, but I never got a response until the mortgage scam started. Then it was a bit too late. I had already started the court procedures for what I knew was happening to me. They declined it at first because I was already 3 months behind. I was led into a foreclosure because of my mortgage scam. Once I discovered it was a mortgage scam, the mortgages were stopped and the foreclosure began.
What happened next? Did they give you a notice?
I got many notices.
Did they try to evict you?
Oh, many times.
And what did you do?
Never move.
How did you fight back?
I heard about City Life on the television. My sister actually called me and told me, look at the television, there's someone for a case just like yours. And I called City Life and I visited their place, and from
just like Yolanda, Pamela had also a wall with the bank she was working with. Facing eviction and the loss of her well-established daycare center, Pamela also joined a Boston housing rights group for help.
Who has more political power, the bank or you? Now, if it's a question of a one-on-one contest, the bank has more. But if you're organized, then we have more. And it's just a question of power.
If it is just the question of power, will our political leaders and our financial institutions do the right thing to help our communities survive? Pamela was successful in keeping her home and daycare by using a combination of fighting her eviction together with local housing rights organizations and also working with an innovative bank. Yes, a bank by the name of Boston Community Capital. Boston Community Capital, also known as BCC Bank, tries to work with struggling homeowners in lower income communities. Instead of punishing homeowners who fell behind in their mortgage payments, BCC is trying to give homeowners a second chance through a buyback program.
The important thing to understand about foreclosures is they don't impact just one person. It's not just the person who's not paying their loan who's impacted when a foreclosure happens. That person's kids are affected. They may have to change schools. They encounter the instability that comes from losing your home. And it's not just the family, it's also the tenants of that family in multifamily properties, and it's the whole neighborhood because properties go down. Boston Community Capital was really concerned about that impact on neighborhoods, and so by helping individual homeowners remain in their homes, we help the neighborhood overall.
In terms of how we might fix this system or what's wrong with it, we might start with a quote from Peter Marcuse, I think it was, who said, "The housing crisis doesn't exist because the system's not working. The housing crisis exists because that's the way the system works." And to give you an example, whenever anybody works hard to improve their neighborhood in the city of Boston, their rent goes up and they get driven out.
What the Stabilizing Urban Neighborhoods initiative does is take homes in foreclosure where the current occupants haven't been evicted, so the homeowner has been foreclosed on but hasn't been kicked out yet. We underwrite the homeowners to understand, do they have a stable income? Can they afford to stay in the home at the current value of the property? And if they can, then we put in an offer to purchase the property from the lender who holds the mortgage. And at that point, if the bank accepts the offer, if the lender accepts the offer, we sell the property back to the homeowner with a mortgage that they can afford. The benefit to banks in working with homeowners who are in foreclosure is that they don't have to go through the foreclosure process. They don't have to go through the eviction process. They don't have to be responsible for maintaining the property. Those are all things that cost an awful lot of money and take a lot of time. In working with an organization like Boston Community Capital, who's willing to pay the fair market price for the property, they're not losing anything and they're saving all that time and money.
In addition to BCC, there are other community and lending groups that are also providing neighborhood stabilization programs. Some of these groups are headed by groups like NACA, COHIF, and JPNC. Not all of these programs will work for each foreclosure case. Homeowners and tenants who are facing foreclosure evictions will need to research which of these programs will best meet their needs. Yolanda gave this advice to other people in her situation.
I would advise tenants that are in my situation to keep fighting for their rights, keep fighting like me, and not to lose strength, to keep going forward. We have to fight against the banks that are abusing us and don't care about leaving someone without work like me, who don't want to negotiate. They don't care that I would be without work for at least 1 year in order to be able to find a place. They don't care about that. Keep fighting to end this abusive behavior of the banks.
I like to say that when you own your own home, you must be very careful and cautious if whatever you're doing regarding refinancing. Always have always make sure that it's a legal person. Always have an attorney to read the fine prints, because there are many fine prints that people do not usually look at. And I think that's what really caused me to get into trouble. There were fine prints that I did not understand. And once you sign that paper, you're in trouble. Fight for your rights. Just don't give up. Do not give up.
I want to ask Fannie Mae to please be more flexible, be more human, look more into the humanity than the money. There are many just like me that can wind up in the street. There are many people that are in the same situation, having problems with them, and they do not have a place to go. I don't even want to think about it. Where would I go? Where would my family go?
Because this woman has been a warrior. She's been fighting. She's made her story public. She's spoke from here to Washington. She's just, to me, she's incredible. We got an email earlier today that just had everybody ecstatic. So, without further ado, I want you to put your hands together because Yolanda Nova is right now. Congratulations, man.
Exactamente viniendo aquí a City Life.
So my name is Yolanda Nova. Some of you know me. I know there's also a lot of new people here. I've been coming here to City Life for exactly 1 year and 2 months now.
Luchando con Fannie Mae.
Fighting against Fannie Mae.
Queriéndome echar de mi casa.
They wanted to kick me out of my house.
Con una organización cogí, quería comprar la casa para vendérmela a mí. Y hoy, por cierto, se cerró el negocio. Victoria para mí.
So I won a victory today. I achieved a victory today because Fannie Mae didn't want to negotiate with the organization. They wanted to buy back the house and sell it back to me. But today, finally, we closed on the negotiations. It was victory for me.
On May 21st, 2013, almost exactly a year since her battle began with Fannie Mae, Yolanda announced that with the help of COHIP, Fannie Mae had finally come to an agreement. They agreed to sell the home to Yolanda so that she, her family, and her daycare center could stay in the Dorchester neighborhood where they had lived for the past 6 years. Whether we are homeowners, renters, activists, politicians, or bankers, we must all work together to keep our communities strong. All our neighborhoods are interconnected and are important in providing a diversified and rich culture that make up the backbone of our cities.